We're taking the best of our young and we're destroying them. And we've been doing that for centuries, and we don't seem to learn anything about it. We keep doing it.
Welcome to a brand new podcast. Iain McLean is a writer and the author of TJ's War. David Blair is an actor and the narrator of the audiobook TJ's War. David and Iain have been listening to their readers and listeners and have decided to turn TJ's War into a movie. And since the story covers the entirety of World War II, the movie will cost at least $50 million. Will David and Iain succeed in their quest? Follow them in this podcast series. We're going to make a $50 million movie.
You know, when I grew up, it was I'm born in the 50s, but most of it was the 60s when I was growing up, and then there was the 70s. We had lots of films, lots of television programs, and all kinds of stuff around the Second World War. The films showed men in uniform running around and getting shot by other men in uniform, and they would just fall to the ground. Another one dead, and in uniform. There was no attempt to put a personality behind that person. That was just another soldier just taken out. Machine gun spray taking out hundreds. All adventure war films. This is how I grew up, along with everybody else who was my age. And so it wasn't a strange thing for me to think that when I leave school, I'll go off and become in my case, a member of the RAF. Jump into aircraft, fly around, and not necessarily kill anyone. Even then, I didn't want to kill anyone, but I never thought about it. I didn't give it a moment's thought. I would just go and be a pilot. And funnily enough, that's exactly what happened. At the age of 17, I joined the RAF, went off to university to study mathematics, and learned to fly. But at the same time, I was spending upwards of a week a year looking into what my father had got up to, who died in 1970. So by the time I was 17, he'd been dead for 7 years. And by the time I got to be about 20, I began to realize that actually, although he'd been in the army, and although he'd been in MI6 during the Second World War, he didn't want to kill anyone. He tried as hard as he could not to, because his father had said to him, try and avoid it. You would want to avoid the mark of Cain, as he referred to it. And really what the mark of Cain is guilt. It's this enormous guilt that you feel if you take the life of anyone. And I don't care what these hard men say, even hard women. When you've taken somebody else's life and you live long enough, you will regret it. It will play on your mind, it will play on your conscience, and it will drag you down. And my grandfather knew that, and he'd said that to my father at a very early age, and all the way through the Second World War, my father did his very best to try and avoid it. But as you'll read in the book, decisions have to be taken at certain points, and it was not easy for him. By the time I got to be 20, I was really struggling with this myself. I hadn't killed anyone, but I could see it coming. Falklands War was just around the corner, and I don't care what anyone says. It was obvious that was going to happen. People were determined to have a war, and they were preparing for it long before the news came out. I didn't know about the Falklands War, but I did know that I didn't want to be where I was. And so I left the RAF, but I left good people. This is the thing that people struggle to understand. They think that if you're in uniform, you're just a number, and you're doing what you're told, and you want to go out there and you want to kill people. But these people who are in uniform are people. They have real feelings. They have mothers and fathers who brought them up. They've got ambitions. They want to live life, most of them. I mean, there are psychopaths in there. That's how the whole thing works. And one of the biggest issues we have is that in putting people into uniform, you can train them to become psychopathic, to become killers. And if you go through the streets of any major city in the UK and probably the rest of Europe and America, you will find people who are homeless, living on the streets because they've been unable to come back into society. They can't face coming back into society because of what they've been forced to do. We're taking the best of our young and we're destroying them. And we've been doing that for centuries and we don't seem to learn anything about it. We keep doing it. So I carried on doing other things for a while. I actually felt guilt about the fact that I'd left all these people behind for a while. But anyway, I got on with my career. And as I sort of climbed the ladder and then came down the other side, I began to think, well, I want people to take this lesson. I want my father, who died at the age of 49, I want his death to have meant something. Because he was a much better man. He was a much more beautiful man than the one I'd known. Because all I'd known in my first 10 years was an alcoholic who really struggled with life. How would he come to that? How would a man at the age of 18 who had been well educated and had gone off to university to study veterinary science ended up being a dead alcoholic at the age of 49? I need people to understand that, because that is what we do with people. Especially when our governments are full of ministers and prime ministers who've never experienced an angry man or a gun pointed at them in their entire lives. Oh yes, they live in fear of the assassin and the assassin's bullet, and they are surrounded by security. But that is not the same as going out into an area where you're putting yourself in harm's way. And they don't understand what they are doing when they are telling their armed forces to go off and do this, that, or the next thing. They are not taking care of our people. They are not taking care of us. So TJ's War is a result of more than 40 years of research of particularly what my father got up to during the Second World War. But it also looks at how some of these events came about. And it tries to take you there. The aim is to make you feel as if you're with him as he's going through this. Because that's what I needed to do. I needed to understand how this alcoholic who died, and my immediate reaction on his death was relief. How had that man come about? Now, my father wasn't abusive, but it's not easy growing up as a kid in a small village when your father's an alcoholic who's being picked out of the gutter on a fairly regular basis and dragged home. It's not easy going to school and being bullied by the other kids who laugh at you and put you to one side as and basically attack you because you are not one of them. You've got a father who's an embarrassment. And at the end of the day, I'm not embarrassed by my father. I'm very proud of him. Turns out he was a hell of a man. And that entire generation that he belonged to were subjected to terrible things. And I think that the ripple effect from that continues today. I was brought up in a particular way, and I have children and I now have grandchildren. And I feel that the effects of the Second World War and what it did to my parents, especially my father, has rippled down on through me and to my children. And it's only when we're able to look back as some kind of civilized society, maybe in centuries from now, we can look back and see how that works. Because right now, very little has changed. And we have despots and tyrants in various locations around the world able to control large groups of people and send them off against each other so that these people, these tyrants, can become even more powerful. How is that possible when we've got things like the internet, where immediate communication right around the world is available, where we can see what's going on? I think we hear, but we don't listen. And that has to change. And TJ's War is my tiny addition to the attempts to try and stop war. Because who wants to kill someone?
To find out more about the book, visit tjswar.com, and to buy it, click on the Amazon link below. To accompany us on our journey, please subscribe to this podcast, because we're going to make a $50 million movie.